Chapter 5. The position occupied by Jacob Wells was certainly an anomalous one. He was a giant trader in a country without commerce, a ripened product of the 19th century, flourishing in a society as primitive as that of the Mediterranean Vandals, a capital of industry and a splendid monopolist. He dominated the most independent aggregate of men ever drawn together from the ends of the earth. An economic missionary, a commercial St. Paul, he preached the doctrines of expediency and force. Believing in the natural rights of man, a child himself of democracy, he bent all men to his absolutism. Government of Jacob Wells, for Jacob Wells and the people, by Jacob Wells, was his unwritten gospel. Single-handed he had carved out his dominion till he gripped the domain of a dozen Roman provinces. At his ukase the population ebbed and flowed over 100,000 miles of territory, and cities sprang up or disappeared at his bidding. Yet he was a common man. The air of the world first smote his lungs on the open prairie by the River Platte, the blue sky overhead and beneath, the green grass of the earth pressing against his tender nakedness. On the horses his eyes first opened, still saddled and gazing in mild wonder on the miracle, for his trapper father had but turned aside from the trail that the wife might have quiet and the birth be accomplished. An hour or so, and the two, which were now three, were in the saddle and overhauling their trapper comrades. The party had not been delayed, no time lost. In the morning his mother cooked the breakfast over the campfire and capped it with a 50-mile ride into the next sundown. The trapper father had come of the sturdy Welsh stock which trickled into early Ohio out of the jostling East, and the mother was a nomadic daughter of the Irish immigrant settlers of Ontario. From both sides came the wanderlust of the blood, the fever to be moving, to be pushing on to the edge of things. In the first year of his life, ere he had learned the way of his legs, Jacob Wells had wandered a horse through 1,000 miles of wilderness and wintered in a hunting lodge on the headwaters of the Red River of the North. His first footgear was moccasins, his first taffy the tallow from a moose. His first generalizations were that the world was composed of great wastes and white vastnesses and populated with Indians and white hunters like his father. A town was a cluster of deerskin lodges, a trading post a seat of civilization, and a factor God Almighty himself. Rivers and lakes existed chiefly for man's use in traveling. Viewed in this light, the mountains puzzled him, but he placed them away in his classification of the inexplicable and did not worry. Men died sometimes, but their meat was not good to eat and their hides worthless, perhaps because they did not grow fur. Pelts were valuable, and with a few bales a man might purchase the earth. Animals were made for men to catch and skin. He did not know what men were made for, unless perhaps for the factor. As he grew older, he modified these concepts, but the process was a continual source of naive apprehension and wonderment. It was not until he became a man and had wandered through half the cities of the States that his expression of childish wonder passed out of his eyes and left them wholly keen and alert. At his boy's first contact with the cities, while he revised his synthesis of things, he also generalized afresh. People who lived in cities were effeminate. They did not carry the points of the compass in their heads, and they got lost easily. That was why they elected to stay in the cities, because they might catch cold and because they were afraid of the dark. They slept under shelter and locked their doors at night. The women were soft and pretty, but they could not lift a snowshoe far in a day's journey. Everybody talked too much. That was why they lied and were unable to work greatly with their hands. Finally, there was a new human force called bluff. A man who made a bluff must be dead sure of it or else be prepared to back it up. Bluff was a very good thing when exercised with discretion. Later, though living his life mainly in the woods and mountains, he came to know that the cities were not all bad, that a man might live in a city and still be a man. Accustomed to do battle with natural forces, he was attracted by the commercial battle with social forces. The masters of marts and exchanges dazzled but did not blind him, and he studied them and strove to grasp the secrets of their strength. And further, in token that some good did come out of Nazareth, in the full tide of manhood he took to himself a city-bred woman. But he still yearned for the edge of things, and the leaven in his blood worked till they went away, and above the Dyea beach on the rim of the forest built the big log trading post. And here, in the mellow of time, he got a proper focus on things, and unified the phenomena of society precisely as he had already unified the phenomena of nature. There was not in one could not be expressed in terms of the other. The same principles underlaid both, the same truths were manifest of both. Competition was the secret of creation, battle was the law and the way of progress. The world was made for the strong, and only the strong inherited it. And through it all there ran an eternal equity. To be honest was to be strong. To sin was to weaken. To bluff an honest man was to be dishonest. To bluff a bluffer was to smite with the steel of justice. The primitive strength was in the arm, the modern strength in the brain. Though it had shifted ground, the struggle was the same old struggle. As of old time, men still fought for the mastery of the earth and the delights thereof. But the sword had given way to the ledger, the mail-clad baron to the soft-garbed industrial lord, and the center of imperial political power to the seat of commercial exchanges. The modern will had destroyed the ancient brute. The stubborn earth yielded only to force. Brain was greater than body. The man with the brain could best conquer things primitive. He did not have much education as education goes. To the 3 R's his mother taught him by campfire and candlelight he had added a somewhat miscellaneous book knowledge, but he was not burdened with what he had gathered. Yet he read the facts of life understandingly, and the sobriety which comes of the soil was his, and the clear earth vision. And so it came about that Jacob Wells crossed over the Chilcoot in an early day and disappeared into the vast unknown. A year later he emerged at the Russian missions clustered about the mouth of the Yukon on Bering Sea. He had journeyed down a river 3,000 miles long. He had seen things and dreamed a great dream. But he held his tongue and went to work. And one day the defiant whistle of a crazy stern-wheel tub saluted the midnight sun on the dank river stretch by Fort O'Yukon. It was a magnificent adventure. How he achieved it only Jacob Wells can tell. But with the impossible to begin with, plus the impossible, he added steamer to steamer and heaped enterprise upon enterprise. Along many 1,000 miles of river and tributary he built trading posts and warehouses. He forced the white man's axe into the hands of the aborigines, and in every village and between the villages rose the cords of 4-foot firewood for his boilers. On an island in Bering Sea, where the river and the ocean met, he established a great distributing station, and on the North Pacific he put big ocean steamships. While in his offices in Seattle and San Francisco, it took clerks by the score to keep the order and system of his business. Men drifted into the land. Hitherto famine had driven them out, but Jacob Wells was there now, and his grub stores. So they wintered in the frost and groped in frozen muck for gold. He encouraged them, grub-staked them, carried them on the books of the company. His steamers dragged them up the Koyukuk in the old days of Arctic City. Wherever pay was struck, he built a warehouse and a store. The town followed. He explored, he speculated, he developed. Tireless, indomitable, with the steel glitter in his dark eyes, he was everywhere at once, doing all things. In the opening up of a new river he was in the van, and at the tail end also, hurrying forward the grub. On the outside, he fought trade combinations, making alliances with the corporations of the earth, and forced discriminating tariffs from the great carriers. On the inside, he sold flour and blankets and tobacco, built sawmills, staked town sites, and sought properties in copper, iron, and coal. And that the miners should be well equipped, ransacked the lands of the Arctic even as far as Siberia for native-made snowshoes, mucklucks, and parkas. He bore the country on his shoulders, saw to its needs, did its work. Every ounce of its dust passed through his hands, every postcard and letter of credit. He did its banking and exchange, carried and distributed its mails. He frowned upon competition, frightened out predatory capital, bluffed militant syndicates, and when they would not, backed his bluff and broke them. And for all, yet found time and place to remember his motherless girl and to love her and to fit her for the position he had made. End of Chapter 5. Read by Don W. Jenkins, Rancho San Diego, California, shaggybark.blogspot.com.